On Christmas night, while everyone gathered for the holiday feast, my world shattered when Mark stood up and announced in front of the entire family that he wanted a divorce. The laughter and joy turned to gasps and whispers as he revealed his affair with my sister Lisa. For years I had been the dutiful wife, always trying to please, but in that moment I felt like I was nothing more than a ghost in my own life. It was like a scene from a movie, but there I was living it. I remember the taste of the turkey turning bitter in my mouth as I tried to process what was happening. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and utterly alone. My family, who had always seemed so supportive, now looked at me with pity as if I were some tragic figure. But as the shock settled in, something inside me began to shift. I had spent years being the one who held everything together, and now I was done being the one who picked up the pieces. I realized that it was time for me to reclaim my power. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let them take everything from me. Now, after years of hard work and determination, I would return to my hometown, not as the discarded wife but as a successful businesswoman ready to reclaim my power. I had built my own career, and I was going to show them that I was more than just a wife or a sister. I was going to take over the company that Mark had once claimed as his own, and I was going to do it on my terms. The stakes were high, and the countdown to my return was already set. The holidays were approaching, and I would make sure my presence was felt. This time I wouldn't be the one to be pitied or scorned. I was going to walk into that family gathering with my head held high, ready to confront the ghosts of my past. I was coming back for what was rightfully mine, and nothing would stand in my way. Growing up, I was always the reliable one, the one everyone depended on. While my sister Lisa was praised for her beauty and charm, I was the one who kept the family together. I was the one who took care of everything: the birthday parties, the family gatherings, the little details that made life easier for everyone else. My parents would beam with pride whenever they talked about Lisa's accomplishments, but I was often overlooked, expected to be the one to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. Mark and I got married right after college, and I thought I was building a life with someone who appreciated me. But even then, I was the one sacrificing my dreams for his career. I took on a job that paid the bills but wasn't my passion, allowing Mark to chase his ambitions. I remember the late nights when I'd come home exhausted, and he'd barely acknowledge my presence, too wrapped up in his own success. It was as if my own aspirations were secondary to his. I had worked hard, but my efforts were never enough for him or for my family. As the years went by, the pattern of favoritism became painfully clear. I would make decisions, big and small, and they were always scrutinized. If I failed, it was amplified. "Why can't you do better, Carol?" As if I was the family disappointment. Meanwhile, Mark and Lisa lived their lives without a care in the world, basking in the attention and praise that came so easily to them. I felt like I was invisible, always in the background, always trying to please everyone but myself. When I finally discovered Mark's affair with Lisa, it was like the final straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of everything I had done for them. It was a culmination of years of being taken for granted, of being the one who kept the family functioning while they pursued their selfish desires. I had built a life around supporting Mark and pretending that our marriage was what I wanted, but in reality, I had lost myself in the process. Now, as I looked at my life, I realized how deeply ingrained this pattern of favoritism was in my family. The betrayal stung, but it also opened my eyes. I had been used as a safety net, someone they could rely on when things went wrong, but never appreciated as a partner in life. My loyalty had become a weakness, and I was done being the one who held everything together. As I prepared to take over the company Mark had let crumble, I could feel the weight of my past lifting. I was ready to shed the victim mentality that had been forced upon me for so long. I had spent years being the dutiful wife, the reliable sister, and it was time to reclaim my story. I was no longer the one who had to apologize for needing to put myself first. I was determined to show them that I was capable of more than they ever imagined. The cost of their betrayal was about to rise exponentially. I was going to take over the company and show them that I was not just a wife or a sister. I was a force to be reckoned with. This wasn't just about business. It was about reclaiming my identity and my worth. I was done living in the shadows of Mark and Lisa's lives. As the holidays approached, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I would return to my hometown not as the discarded wife, but as a successful businesswoman, ready to reclaim my power. I was going to walk into that family gathering with my head held high, ready to confront them both. They thought they could take everything from me, but they had no idea what I was capable of. I was coming back for what was rightfully mine, and nothing would stand in my way. After years of building my own business, I stumbled upon a shocking truth that shattered my already fragile sense of security. I had spent countless hours pouring my heart and soul into my work, all the while believing that my efforts were being appreciated. Little did I know that Mark had been letting the company crumble without my knowledge, all while he was dating Lisa. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I ever thought possible. The discovery came when I received a call from one of the employees I had trusted. He hesitated before speaking, but I could tell he was anxious. "Carol, you need to see these financial documents," he said, his voice low. My heart raced as I met him at a coffee shop, the weight of my past hanging heavily on my shoulders. When I glanced at the papers he handed me, my stomach twisted into knots. The numbers were alarming. I could see the mismanaged funds, the reckless spending, and the risky decisions that Mark had made, all without my consent. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. It was as if my entire life had been a lie. I had trusted him, supported him, and sacrificed so much for his career, only to find out that he had been using me as a safety net. In that moment it became crystal clear. I was not just a partner in his life. I was a resource to be exploited. I was the one who had held everything together while he was off chasing his dreams, and now I was left with the shattered remnants of a company that I had helped build. I felt an overwhelming mix of anger and betrayal wash over me. My resolve hardened. I wasn't going to let them get away with this any longer. No more conversations, this time I would act. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my worth. I had spent years being the reliable one, the one who picked up the pieces, and I was done being the victim of their manipulation. I was going to take control, and I was going to do it on my terms. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. I would rise above it. I called Mark and Lisa to meet at my office, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. This was it, the moment I would confront them both and take back what was rightfully mine. As I walked into the conference room, I could feel the tension in the air. They both sat there looking smug and overconfident, as if they had already won. "I will be taking over the company, and you both will be let go. This isn't up for discussion," I stated firmly, keeping my tone steady. I refused to let the pain they had caused me seep into my voice. Their expressions shifted from casual amusement to disbelief. Mark's brow furrowed while Lisa scoffed, dismissing my words as mere bravado. "You think you can do this? You'll never make it without us," Lisa laughed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But as I looked into Mark's eyes, I could see a flicker of uncertainty. The doubt that they had once cast upon me was now reflecting back at them. They had underestimated me for far too long. Their refusal to accept my boundary only fueled my determination. I knew they wouldn't respect my decision willingly, but I was prepared to fight for my rightful place. I had done the work, and I was ready to prove that I was more than just a supporting character in their lives. As the days passed, I meticulously planned my strategy. I gathered evidence of their mismanagement and began preparing for the takeover. I wanted to show my employees that I was capable of leading the company to success. I was no longer going to be the one who picked up the pieces. I was going to be the one building something new from the ground up. The anger I felt toward Mark and Lisa transformed into a powerful motivation. I wasn't just taking back the company. I was reclaiming my identity. I was determined to show them that I was a force to be reckoned with, and I wouldn't let their betrayal define my future. I was ready to take my life back, one bold step at a time. I called Mark and Lisa to meet at my office, setting a firm boundary that would change everything. I wanted them to know that the tables had turned. This was no longer about the three of us. It was about me reclaiming what was mine. I wanted them to see that I was serious, and this time, I wasn't going to let their dismissive attitudes undermine my authority. As I sat behind my desk, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of everything I had been through. The years of feeling overlooked, the sacrifices I had made for Mark's career, the betrayal that had cut so deep. I was done being the reliable one who always picked up the pieces. It was time for me to take control of my life. When they arrived, I could see the smug looks on their faces. Mark strolled in, acting as if he owned the place, while Lisa followed closely behind, her eyes filled with that familiar condescending pity. They were both in for a surprise. I wasted no time. I will be taking over the company, and you both will be let go. This isn't up for discussion, I stated firmly, my voice steady even as my heart raced. I made direct eye contact with each of them, refusing to back down. I needed them to understand that I meant every word. Mark's face fell, shifting from his usual confidence to a look of disbelief. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. Lisa, on the other hand, couldn't help but laugh. You think you can just waltz in here and take over? You'll never make it without us, she scoffed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I kept my cool. These reactions were exactly what I expected from them. They had always underestimated my capabilities, and that was about to change. I could see a flicker of doubt in Mark's eyes. You've both had your chance to run the company, and we can all see how that turned out, I continued, keeping my tone even. This is my time now, and I won't let your past failures hold me back any longer. I've worked too hard to let you both derail my plans. Lisa opened her mouth to retort, but I raised my hand, cutting her off. This is not a negotiation. I'm done being the one who has to explain myself to you. I've spent years being the reliable one, and it's time for me to put myself first. I'm taking control of my life and my career. Mark's expression shifted slightly as he processed my words. I could tell he was struggling to find a way to regain control of the situation. That flicker of doubt I had seen earlier was now turning into something more akin to fear. He had always been the one who called the shots, and now the power dynamics were shifting. You can't do this to family, Carol, he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. Don't you care about your sister? I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Their attempts to manipulate me through guilt no longer held power over me. It was a tactic I had seen too many times before, and I was ready to counter it. This isn't about family. It's about business. I can't afford to let personal relationships cloud my judgment. You both have had your chances, and I'm not about to let you drag this company down any further. Lisa chimed in, her voice rising defensively. You're being selfish, Carol. You owe it to us to keep us on board. Their words were nothing but empty threats now. I could see their frustration boiling over, but I stood firm, knowing full well that they were trying to play me against my own emotions. You've both made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I will no longer be the one sacrificing my dreams for your failures. I'm taking over, and you both will be leaving the company, I reiterated, my voice steady and unwavering. The tension in the room was thick, and I could see the storm brewing in Mark's eyes. He was furious, but I refused to back down. I had made my decision, and I was ready to see it through. They might have thought I was bluffing, but I knew that this was the moment I had to seize. I had spent years being the one who held everything together, and now I was going to build something new from the ground up. This was my chance, and I wasn't going to let their doubt or anger hold me back any longer. As the countdown to the takeover approached, I braced myself for the inevitable backlash from Mark and Lisa. I knew they wouldn't take my decision lightly. They had always relied on me, and now they were facing the prospect of losing everything they had taken for granted. The pressure mounted, and I could sense their desperation as they tried to manipulate me into reconsidering my plans. Mark was the first to reach out, and his call was laced with a sense of urgency. You can't do this to family, Carol. You're throwing away everything we've built together. Don't you care about your sister? His voice was strained, and I could almost hear the panic in his tone. It was a classic tactic, one I was all too familiar with. He was trying to appeal to my sense of loyalty, to guilt me into backing down from my decision, but I was done playing that game. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my worth and the sacrifices I had made for both of them over the years. It was time to stand up for myself. Mark, this isn't about family. It's about business. You both have had your chance to run this company, and look where it got us. I can't let personal relationships cloud my judgment any longer. I need to do what's best for the company, and that means taking control of my own future. His response was immediate, a mix of anger and disbelief. You're being selfish, Carol. You owe it to us to keep us on board. We're family, and you're just going to throw us out? You're ruining our lives. The desperation in his voice was palpable, but I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. Their attempts to pull me back into their web of manipulation were no longer effective. I refused to be the one who sacrificed my dreams for their failures. Lisa joined the fray, her voice matching Mark's in intensity. You're making a huge mistake. Without us, you'll fail. You can't possibly think you can run this place on your own. Her words dripped with condescension, but I could see the fear behind her bravado. They were both scrambling to keep their positions intact, and it was almost comical how predictable their responses were. I didn't flinch. Instead, I felt a surge of confidence. I had spent years being the one to clean up their messes, and I was tired of it. You've both made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I'm done being the reliable one who always picks up the pieces. It's time for me to put myself first. I will not let your failures define my future. This company deserves better leadership, and that's exactly what I'm going to provide. Mark's frustration boiled over, and he resorted to one final attempt to manipulate me. What about the employees? They'll be devastated if you fire us. Don't you care about them? He was pulling out every trick in the book, attempting to guilt me into reconsidering my plans. But I shook my head, resolute in my decision. I do care about the employees, and that's exactly why I'm making this change. They deserve a leader who is committed to their success, not someone who will let the company flounder just to maintain a facade of family loyalty. You both have proven that you cannot be trusted with this responsibility. I will not let your past mistakes dictate the future of this company. There was a moment of silence on the line, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. I knew they were processing my decision, grappling with the reality that their control over my life was slipping away. I could almost hear the gears turning in Mark's head as he tried to come up with a counterargument, but I wasn't going to give him the chance to regain his footing. I continued, my voice steady. The days of me being the one who sacrifices for everyone else are over. I've spent too long being the one to hold things together while you both chase your dreams. It's time for me to build my own life, and I'm not going to let you stand in my way. I'm taking over the company, and I will be moving forward without either of you. With that, I hung up the phone, my heart racing but my resolve stronger than ever. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me as I realized that I was finally taking control of my life. They had underestimated me for far too long, and now I was ready to prove them wrong. I was no longer going to be the one who cleaned up after them. I was going to build something new and successful on my own terms. As I sat in my office, the weight of the past began to lift. I was determined to show them that I was capable of leading this company to new heights. I wouldn't just take back what was rightfully mine. I would thrive in my own right. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. I was ready to reclaim my identity and my worth, and nothing would hold me back now. The day of the company takeover arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air as I prepared myself for what was about to unfold. Mark and Lisa were no strangers to manipulation and deceit, and I knew they would set up a situation where they expected me to fail. They had been plotting and scheming, thinking that they could undermine me. I could almost hear their whispers and feel their anticipation. But this time I wasn't going to crumble under pressure. I had worked too hard to let their games get to me. As I walked into the office that morning, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The walls that had once felt like a cage now felt like the launchpad for my new life. I could see my employees bustling around, and I sensed their curiosity about the changes I was about to announce. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the journey I had taken to get here. I wasn't just taking over a company. I was reclaiming my life. Mark and Lisa had planned a public announcement to the staff, anticipating that I would crumble in front of everyone. They wanted to see me falter, wanted to witness the moment I would back down and surrender to their manipulation. I could almost imagine their smug expressions as they believed they had the upper hand, but they didn't know me as well as they thought they did. When I stepped up to the podium, I felt the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. The room was filled with a mixture of skepticism and concern, and I could feel the whispered doubts circulating among the staff. They were unsure if I could handle the pressure, if I was truly capable of leading the company. But this was my moment to prove them wrong. I cleared my throat and began to speak, my voice steady and unwavering. Thank you all for being here today. I know this is a time of uncertainty, but I want to assure you that I am committed to leading this company into a brighter future. We've faced challenges, but with the right leadership, we can overcome anything. As I spoke, I could see Mark and Lisa exchanging glances, their confidence starting to waver. They had expected me to falter, to show signs of doubt, but I was standing firm. I continued, I will be restructuring the company to ensure we are positioned for success. Effective immediately, we will be implementing new policies that will align our goals and drive us forward. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could hear the murmurs of disbelief. Mark, unable to contain himself, interrupted me, trying to undermine my authority right in front of everyone. This is ridiculous. You can't just make decisions like this without consulting us. You have no idea what it takes to run this place. His voice was laced with anger, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. Instead of reacting, I calmly stated, Mark, your time here is over. This is my company now, and I will do what it takes to ensure its success. I appreciate your past contributions, but it's time for a new direction. I won't let your failures dictate the future of this organization any longer. I turned off the microphone and walked away from the podium, allowing the stunned silence to settle over the room. I had done what I set out to do. I had asserted my authority and taken control. The chaos erupted behind me as Mark and Lisa scrambled to regain their footing, realizing they had underestimated me once again. As I walked back to my office, the adrenaline coursed through me. I could hear the whispers behind me, but this time, they were filled with admiration and disbelief. My employees were beginning to see me as a leader, and I felt empowered by their support. I had broken the pattern of favoritism and manipulation that had plagued my life for so long. I was no longer the one who picked up the pieces. I was the one building something new and strong. With each step I took, I could feel the weight of my past lifting. I had faced my fears and stood up to my antagonists in front of the people I was meant to lead. I was ready to take this company into a new era, one that was defined by my vision and determination. No more would I allow my life to be dictated by others. I was reclaiming my power, and it felt liberating. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived, and there was no turning back. I had taken the first step toward a brighter future, and I was ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. I was ready to lead with confidence, and I knew that I had finally broken free from the chains of my past. As I announced my plans to restructure the company, Mark interrupted, trying to undermine my authority in front of everyone. He was clearly rattled, desperate to regain control, and I could see the anger boiling within him. Instead of reacting, I calmly stated, Mark, your time here is over. This is my company now. With that, I turned off the microphone and walked away from the podium. The stunned silence that followed spoke volumes. I didn't have to shout or plead. My action was decisive and irreversible. The chaos erupted behind me as Mark and Lisa scrambled, realizing they had underestimated me once again. I could hear the murmurs from the staff. They were shocked but intrigued. I could sense the shifting dynamics in the room. For too long, I had been the one who held everything together while they took advantage of my loyalty. But now I was taking back control. As I made my way back to my office, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. I had stood up for myself. I had made a statement that couldn't be ignored. It felt exhilarating to finally break free from their grip. The moment I closed the door to my office, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. My heart was racing, but there was no fear. I felt empowered. I spent years being the reliable one, the one who sacrificed her dreams for their happiness. I had been the one to clean up their messes time and again, and now I was ready to build something new from the ground up. I opened my laptop, determined to outline my vision for the company. I was ready to make some real changes, but even as I focused on my work, I could hear the chaos continuing outside. Mark and Lisa were trying to rally the staff against me, hoping to create an uprising. I could hear snippets of their conversations through the thin walls, and it made my blood boil. They were trying to manipulate my employees into siding with them, painting me as the villain in this story. I knew I had to act quickly. I called an emergency staff meeting for later that day. I wanted to address the rumors and reassure my team that I was there for them. I would not let Mark and Lisa poison the well any longer. This was my moment to shine, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. As I prepared for the meeting, I envisioned the way I would address my employees. I wanted to be transparent and genuine. They had been through a lot, and I owed it to them to be upfront about the changes that were coming. When the time came, I stood in front of the staff, my heart racing but my resolve unshaken. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I began, looking around at the faces that had once been filled with uncertainty, but were now beginning to spark with curiosity. "I know there's been a lot of chaos recently, and I want to address that directly." I could see Mark and Lisa in the back, their expressions filled with resentment. But I didn't let that deter me. I continued. "I want you to know that I'm committed to leading this company into a brighter future. We've faced challenges, but with the right leadership, I believe we can overcome anything." I could see some of the employees nodding, their expressions shifting from skepticism to support. They were beginning to believe in me, and that fueled my determination. I pressed on. "The restructuring plan I announced earlier is meant to streamline our operations and ensure that we can work more efficiently. I value each of you, and I want to make sure your voices are heard in this process." As I spoke, I noticed Mark squirming in his seat. He didn't like that I was gaining traction with the team. I took a breath and continued. "I know that change can be difficult, but it's necessary for growth. I want to hear your feedback and ideas about how we can move forward together." I could see Lisa whispering to Mark, trying to rally him to intervene. But I wouldn't allow that to happen. I had taken control, and I was not going to let them derail me again. "I'm confident in our ability to navigate this transition," I asserted, looking directly at my team. "We have a talented group here, and I believe that together we can achieve great things. I'm here to support you, and I hope you'll support me as we move forward." The room started to buzz with conversation, and I could feel the tide turning. Mark and Lisa were losing their grip, and I was gaining momentum. I felt a surge of energy as I realized that I was finally being seen for who I truly was, a capable leader ready to take the reins. After the meeting, several employees approached me, expressing their support. They were ready to follow my lead, and that made my heart swell with pride. I had broken the pattern, and I was finally stepping into my power. It was liberating, and I was excited for what lay ahead. As the days went on, Mark and Lisa continued to try to undermine me, but I was ready for their antics. I had learned to anticipate their moves and counter them effectively. I started to implement my vision for the company, and with every positive change, I could see the staff growing more confident in my leadership. Each small success felt like a victory against the toxic patterns that had held me back for so long. I was no longer the woman who allowed others to dictate my worth. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I intended to keep it that way. With each passing day, I felt the weight of my past being lifted. I had stood up to my antagonists, and I was finally free to build the future I had always dreamed of. I was taking control, and nothing could hold me back. The initial shock of the takeover quickly morphed into a frenzy of outrage from both Mark and Lisa. Instead of accepting their defeat gracefully, they lashed out, throwing accusations and blame my way as if their rage could somehow reverse the situation. "You ruined everything," Mark shouted, his face contorted with anger. His eyes, once filled with a sense of superiority, now reflected the panic of a man who had lost control. I could see him trying to rally himself, his emotions swinging wildly between rage and disbelief. It was clear he couldn't comprehend how I had managed to turn the tables on him so completely. Lisa joined in, her voice dripping with venom. "You're nothing without us. You think you can just walk in here and take over? You have no idea what it takes to run this company." Her words were meant to sting, to undermine my confidence, but all they did was reinforce my resolve. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. I stood my ground, refusing to let their anger intimidate me. I felt a strange sense of validation in that moment, bolstered by the shocked expressions on my employees' faces. They were witnessing the true colors of Mark and Lisa, and it was becoming increasingly clear that they were not the savvy leaders they pretended to be. Rather, they were simply two people who had relied on my hard work and dedication to keep things afloat, while they indulged in their own ambitions. As I watched Mark and Lisa spiral into their respective meltdowns, I realized that their inability to take responsibility for their actions was a reflection of their character, not mine. They were so entrenched in their own delusions of grandeur that they couldn't grasp the reality of what was happening. I had finally stepped out of the shadows they had cast over me for years, and now they were flailing in the light I had created. The din of their accusations only served to highlight the contrast between their chaotic attempts to regain control and my calm demeanor. I had spent far too long being the scapegoat, the one who always picked up the pieces while they played the roles of the perfect couple. No more. I was done allowing them to dictate my value. I had taken a stand and I wasn't about to back down now. As the staff began to murmur amongst themselves, I could feel the tide shifting in my favor. They were starting to see the truth behind the facade. Mark and Lisa, who had once been untouchable in their positions, were now the architects of their own downfall. This was not just my victory. It was a collective awakening for everyone who had ever felt sidelined or undermined. In the days that followed, the fallout from the takeover continued to reverberate throughout the company. Mark and Lisa's attempts to undermine me became increasingly desperate, and it was clear that they were struggling to adapt to their new reality. I received reports from employees about how poorly they were managing their roles without my guidance. Some even voiced their concerns about the chaotic atmosphere they were fostering. During a public meeting one afternoon, Mark attempted to salvage his reputation, but it only served to make him look foolish. He stumbled over his words, trying to convince the staff that he still had their best interests at heart. It was painful to watch, yet oddly satisfying as I realized how far I had come. One employee even leaned over to me during the meeting and whispered, "How did you put up with them for so long?" That question resonated with me. I had spent years being the reliable one, the one who sacrificed her dreams for their happiness. I had been the one to clean up their messes time and again, and now I was finally free from their toxic influence. I felt like a weight had been lifted, and I was thriving in my newfound freedom. As the company began to stabilize under my leadership, I felt the confidence of my employees growing. They were no longer looking at Mark and Lisa as the authority figures they once thought they were. Instead, they were beginning to see the potential in my vision, and they were eager to be a part of this new chapter. I had shed a burden I didn't even know I had been carrying, and the air felt lighter. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me back for so long. I was no longer a ghost in my own life. I was a force to be reckoned with. I embraced the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that I had the support of a team that believed in me. I was ready to lead with confidence, and I was determined to prove that I was more than capable of steering this ship in the right direction. The chaos that Mark and Lisa had unleashed upon the company only served to highlight their own failures. They were floundering without my support, and it was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone around us. I had not just taken control of a company. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my voice. No longer would I allow someone else to dictate my worth or my future. As I reflected on what had transpired, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was ready to take this company to new heights and to show everyone, including Mark and Lisa, that I was more than capable of leading with integrity and vision. I was thriving and I was excited for what lay ahead. As the company began to spiral into chaos without my guidance, it became increasingly clear to everyone that Mark and Lisa were utterly incompetent without the support they had previously taken for granted. I had spent years holding everything together, and now their lack of leadership was on full display for all to see. Reports started rolling in from employees detailing how poorly things were being managed in their absence. It was almost painful to witness, yet at the same time, it was gratifying to realize that I had been the backbone of this operation all along. During one particularly telling meeting, Mark attempted to salvage what was left of his reputation. He stood up in front of a room full of employees, trying to regain some semblance of authority. But his nervousness was palpable, and his attempts to sound confident were undermined by the tremor in his voice. He rambled on about how he had always prioritized the company's success, but it was clear that he was floundering. The employees exchanged glances, and I could see the skepticism reflected in their eyes. They had witnessed the truth unfold before them, and there was no turning back. One employee even leaned over to me during the meeting and whispered, "How did you put up with them for so long?" That question struck a chord deep within me. I had spent years being the reliable one, the one who sacrificed her dreams for their happiness. For so long I had been the one to clean up their messes time and again, and now I was finally free from their toxic influence. I felt like a weight had been lifted, and I was thriving in my newfound freedom. As I watched Mark stammer and struggle, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far I had come. I had been the one to stand up against their manipulation and deceit, and now the truth was out in the open. My employees were beginning to recognize my value, and they were starting to see Mark and Lisa for who they really were. They were not the savvy leaders they pretended to be. They were simply two people who had relied on my hard work and dedication to keep things afloat while they indulged in their own ambitions. The fallout from the takeover continued to reverberate throughout the company. Mark and Lisa's attempts to undermine me became increasingly desperate and erratic. They were struggling to adapt to their new reality, and were trying to rally support from employees who had seen the truth. I received reports from my team about how they were trying to create a narrative that painted me as the villain in this story, but the employees weren't buying it. They had seen me step up during the chaos, and they were beginning to trust me. Every small success I achieved felt like a victory against the toxic patterns that had held me back for so long. I was no longer the woman who allowed others to dictate my worth. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I intended to keep it that way. I started to implement my vision for the company, and with every positive change, I could see the staff growing more confident in my leadership. The distance I had created between myself and my former life was not just physical. It was emotional and psychological. I was no longer tied to the past that had held me back. As the weeks unfolded, I began to notice a transformation within the company culture. People were more engaged and motivated. They were starting to share ideas and collaborate in ways I had never seen before. I held regular meetings to gather input and foster a sense of community among the staff. My vision for the company extended beyond mere profitability. I wanted to create an environment where everyone felt valued and had the opportunity to contribute. I wanted to break the cycle of favoritism that had plagued my life for so long. One day, during a brainstorming session, one of the junior employees suggested an innovative approach to streamline our operations. I could see the excitement in their eyes as they spoke, and it reminded me of the passion I once had before I was consumed by Mark and Lisa's toxicity. I encouraged them to take the lead on this project, and I made it clear that I supported their ideas. The sense of ownership and empowerment I witnessed was invigorating. It was proof that I was not only reclaiming my identity, but also inspiring others to reclaim theirs. In stark contrast, Mark and Lisa's inability to take responsibility for their actions was becoming a running joke among the staff. They could see the incompetence plainly, and it served to strengthen my position. Employees began to approach me, sharing their frustrations about the chaos that had ensued ever since Mark and Lisa lost their grip. They were eager to work with me and contribute to the positive changes I was implementing. It felt good to know that I had earned their trust and respect. I had shed a burden I didn't even know I had been carrying, and the air felt lighter. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me back for so long. I was no longer a ghost in my own life. I was a force to be reckoned with. I embraced the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that I had the support of a team that believed in me. The distance between me and Mark and Lisa was no longer a burden. It was a source of strength. I was ready to take this company to new heights, and together we would thrive. Reflecting on the journey I had taken, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had faced my fears, stood up to my antagonists, and emerged stronger than ever. I was ready to lead with confidence, and I was determined to prove that I was more than capable of steering this ship in the right direction. My employees were no longer looking to Mark and Lisa as the authority figures they once thought they were. Instead, they were beginning to see the potential in my vision, and they were eager to be a part of this new chapter. I was thriving, and I was excited for what lay ahead. My past no longer defined me. It was merely a stepping stone to the future I was creating. No longer would I allow someone else to dictate my worth or my future. I was taking control, and nothing could hold me back. With my business flourishing, I finally felt like I had created a life I could be proud of. The toxic relationships with Mark and Lisa had faded into the background, and I was now surrounded by true friends and supportive colleagues who valued my hard work and dedication. Every day felt like a new opportunity to thrive, and I was no longer haunted by the shadows of my past. Mark and Lisa remained bitter and resentful, but I had learned to embrace the distance between us. I didn't need their approval or validation anymore. I had built my own identity, separate from their chaos. I moved into a new apartment, a space that felt like a sanctuary. I decorated it with colors that reflected my personality, and filled it with things that brought me joy. I even treated myself to a weekend getaway, something I had always wanted to do but never felt I deserved. I was living life on my own terms, and it was exhilarating. The company continued to grow under my leadership, and I was finally respected for my contributions. I implemented new strategies that improved productivity and morale. My employees were engaged and motivated, and I could see the positive changes reflected in our results. I had transformed not only the company but also my own life. As I looked back on my journey, I realized that the true victory was not just in the business success, but in reclaiming my dignity and peace of mind. I was no longer defined by my past. I had taken control of my future. The silence I once feared was now a source of strength. I had finally found my voice, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.